The whole world stopped and stared. From the Vatican to Manila, everyone was waiting, holding their breath. Pope Francis was in the hospital, and people everywhere were worried. The faithful prayed with all their hearts, hoping for good news. Meanwhile, cardinals, those important church leaders, rushed to Vatican City. All eyes were on them. A little chimney became the center of attention, a sign of hope. Everyone knew what to look for: white smoke. That would mean a new pope had been chosen. On social media, people couldn't stop guessing and chatting about it. Catholics around the world felt connected, waiting together for the big moment. Subscribe before proceeding further in the video. Then it happened. A day no one will ever forget. White smoke puffed out of the chimney, shooting up into the bright blue sky over Rome. The news spread fast, like a spark lighting up dry grass. People cheered and celebrated all over the planet. A new pope was here. The world paused again, buzzing with excitement. Who was this new leader of the Catholic Church? Down in St. Peter's Square, a huge crowd went quiet. They looked up at the balcony, waiting. Cardinal Giovanni Battista Re stepped out. He's the head of the cardinals, and with a serious voice he spoke the famous Latin words, "Annuntio vobis gaudium magnum, habemus papam." In plain English, "I bring you great joy. We have a pope." The crowd gasped as he announced the name, Luis Antonio Tagle, the Archbishop of Manila. People couldn't believe it. They shouted with joy and amazement. For the first time in 2,000 years, an Asian man had become pope. The impossible had happened. The Catholic Church was stepping into a new chapter. This new pope, Luis Antonio Tagle, wasn't a stranger to many. Born in 1957 in Manila, Philippines, he'd already made a name for himself. Now, he was the 266th leader to follow in St. Peter's footsteps, ready to guide the church into the future. He was a man people loved for his big smile, humble ways, and huge heart for the poor. His journey from Manila to becoming the leader of the Catholic Church showed his strong faith and sharp mind. Born in the Philippines, Luis Antonio Tagle became a priest in 1982. Even as a young man, his smarts stood out. He went to Rome and earned a doctorate from a top university there. But he never let his brainy side outshine his kind, caring nature. Tagle worked as a parish priest, a teacher in a seminary, and later became the Bishop of Imus. Everywhere he went, people saw him as a great pastor, a wise teacher, and someone who fought for fairness and justice. In 2011, Pope Benedict picked him to be the Archbishop of Manila. As Archbishop, Tagle spoke up for the poor and those treated unfairly. He worked hard to ease their struggles, and his warmth and dedication won hearts not just in the Philippines, but all over the world. When Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle was chosen as Pope, it shook things up in a big way. For hundreds of years, popes had almost always been European, tied to the Church's old roots in the West. But Tagle's election showed the world something new: the growing power of the global South, especially Asia, in the Catholic Church. Asia, with its rich cultures and deep traditions, had seen more and more people become Catholic in recent years. The Philippines, in particular, was a powerhouse of faith, home to the third-largest Catholic population on the planet. Tagle's rise was a nod to this lively faith, proof that the Church was thriving in Asian soil. Plus, he was like a bridge between East and West. He understood Asian ways, spoke several languages, and knew how to connect with all kinds of people. That made him the perfect person to lead the Church in today's wide-open, connected world. His papacy promised a church that welcomed everyone, a big, diverse family full of life and love. Back home in the Philippines, the news of Tagle becoming Pope set off a party like no one had ever seen. From the busy streets of Manila to tiny villages across the islands, Filipinos couldn't contain their happiness. People danced, cheered, and celebrated. Their very own son was now the leader of the Catholic world. Church bells rang out loud and clear. Fireworks painted the night sky with color, and people danced in the streets, their faces glowing with pride. For Filipinos, a people with a deep love for their faith, Pope Tagle's election was a huge moment, a burst of national joy. It showed the world how much the Philippines had given to the Catholic Church. It was a reward for a country that had held on to its faith through tough times, colonization, natural disasters, and political struggles. To many, Tagle becoming Pope felt like a special blessing straight from God for a nation that always kept faith at its heart. The wild celebrations weren't just about Tagle being popular. They showed the unbreakable bond between Filipinos and their beliefs. His rise brought hope and excitement, a reminder that even in a dark world, faith could shine like a bright light. From the second Pope Tagle stepped onto the balcony above St. Peter's Square, he won people over with his warm smile, humble spirit, and a message of kindness and togetherness. He had a big dream for the church, a place that welcomed the poor, the left out, and the forgotten. A church that spread hope and did good in a world that sometimes felt lost. Tagle cared deeply about fairness. He spoke out against poverty, inequality, and those who took advantage of the weak. He told powerful people to use their strength to help everyone, not just themselves, saying real leaders serve others. His words touched not just Catholics, but people of all beliefs, and even those with none, who saw him as a bold voice for the voiceless. Tagle wanted a church that built bridges, not walls. He reached out to people on the edges, encouraging respect and understanding between different cultures and religions. He saw the church as a healer, bringing unity to a world split by arguments and fights. But being Pope wasn't all easy. Pope Tagle's hopeful ideas and plans to shake things up came with challenges. The Catholic Church is huge, old, and complicated, with pressures from inside and out. While lots of people loved his vision for a fairer, more open church, not everyone was on board. Some traditional folks in the church, priests and regular people alike, pushed back. They weren't so sure about his focus on justice, his chats with other faiths, or his ideas to give local churches more freedom. Change wasn't going to be simple. Not everyone was happy with Pope Tagle's big ideas. Some people thought his changes went too far, shaking up the church's old ways and teachings. Others weren't sure about what he thought on tricky topics, like whether priests should marry or how women could play bigger roles in the church. On top of that, the church was still dealing with messy problems from the past, like scandals about abuse and money troubles. Pope Tagle stepped into all this, facing the tough job of winning back people's trust and fixing the deep issues that caused those problems. Even with all these hurdles, Pope Tagle's time as Pope still shone like a bright light for millions. His kindness, humble ways, and fierce love for the poor and overlooked touched people everywhere, Catholics and non-Catholics alike. He dreamed of a fairer, more caring world, and that hope cut through the gloom like a ray of sunshine. He didn't just talk, he acted. Tagle launched big projects to fight for justice, bring different faiths together, and protect the planet. One of Pope Tagle's boldest moves was calling a special meeting, something called a synod, all about the Amazon rainforest. He didn't just want to talk about it, he brought together bishops from every corner of the world to dig into the real problems facing the people who live there. These were folks whose lives were being turned upside down by deforestation. Trees being chopped down faster than anyone could count. The land they depended on was shrinking, their rivers were getting polluted, and their way of life was at risk. Tagle made sure the church didn't just sit back and watch. He wanted action, ideas to protect the Amazon's indigenous communities and stop the environmental damage before it was too late. It was a big, brave step that showed he cared about people and the planet. But that wasn't all. He also created a brand new team right in the Vatican, a group focused on tackling some of the world's toughest challenges. This wasn't just any team, it was like his task force for hope. They zeroed in on issues like poverty, which keeps so many people trapped in hunger and hardship. They worked on ways to help migrants, those who leave their homes looking for safety or a better life, often with nothing but the clothes on their backs. And they took on climate change, that giant problem threatening the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the future of our world. Tagle made it clear, the church wasn't going to stand on the sidelines. It was going to roll up its sleeves and make a difference. On top of that, he put a huge spotlight on bringing people together, especially people who believe different things. He made it a top priority to sit down and chat with leaders from all kinds of religions. He met with other Christians from groups big and small, swapping stories and ideas. But he didn't stop there. He reached out to Muslims, Buddhists, Hindus, and more. Picture it. The Pope sharing a table with folks from faiths so different, yet finding common ground. These weren't just polite handshakes. They were real conversations that built understanding. In a world where beliefs often spark fights or draw lines, Tagle's meetups were like bridges, linking people up instead of splitting them apart. He wanted peace, and he knew it started with listening and respecting each other. These efforts turned heads and opened hearts. The Amazon Synod showed he wasn't afraid to tackle messy, real-world problems. His Vatican team proved he was serious about helping the helpless. And those chats with other faith leaders? They painted a picture of a church that didn't just preach about unity, it lived it. Pope Tagle was building something bigger than himself, a movement of care, connection, and hope that stretched far beyond the walls of Vatican City. As the years rolled by, it became impossible to miss the impact Pope Tagle was having. He wasn't just another name in the history books. He was leaving a legacy that people could feel, one built on hope and a push for a better world. His time as Pope wasn't about flashy speeches or empty promises. It was about rolling up his sleeves and making things happen. He sparked a wave of change in the Catholic Church, like a gust of fresh air blowing through a stuffy room. This wasn't a quick fix or a short-lived buzz. It was a deep, lasting shift, a renewal that would keep rippling forward even after he handed over the keys to the next pope. Tagle had a vision, a big, beautiful dream of a world that was kinder, fairer, and open to everyone. He didn't just talk about it, he lived it, and that made it stick. His ideas weren't meant to fade away. They were like seeds planted in people's hearts, ready to grow and inspire kids, grandkids, and generations way down the line. He wanted a church and a world where no one was left out, where the doors were flung wide open for the poor, the struggling, and the forgotten. That dream wasn't just a wish. It was a guiding light, a roadmap for anyone who wanted to follow in his footsteps. What really set Pope Tagle apart was how he showed the world what leadership should look like. It wasn't about sitting on a throne or chasing power or showing off with fancy titles. For him, being a leader meant getting down in the dirt with people, listening to their stories, and lifting them up with love. He didn't care about the spotlight. He cared about service. Whether he was speaking to a crowd of thousands or sitting quietly with someone in need, He proved that real strength comes from kindness, not control. That lesson wasn't just for the church. It was for everyone, everywhere. A reminder that the best way to lead is to care. His time as Pope became a living example of all this. He didn't just preach about helping others. He made sure the church stepped up to do it. He didn't just say, "Love your neighbor." He showed how, by reaching out to people, others ignored. And he didn't just hope for a better future. He started building it, piece by piece, with every decision he made. The mark he left wasn't carved in stone or gold. It was etched in the lives he touched, the changes he sparked, and the hope he spread. Even as the world kept spinning with its messy problems, Pope Tagle stood out as a steady voice saying, "We can do better, and here's how." His legacy wasn't just about what he did. It was about what he inspired others to keep doing, long after his voice fell silent. He never stopped caring for the poor, bringing people together to talk things out, and pushing the church to be a force for good. That left a mark on the Catholic Church and the whole world that won't fade. Sure, the world's still got huge problems. Poverty, unfairness, fighting, and climate change keep making life tough. But Pope Tagle's time as Pope sent out a spark of hope. He reminded us that even little acts of kindness can ripple out and matter. Together, we can make a world that's more just and full of love for everyone. Thanks for joining us. If you liked this story, hit that subscribe button for more cool stuff. See you next time.